Well, is it time for David Poile and the Nashville Predators to gracefully go their separate ways? That's $1 million question. We're going to look at why maybe Poile should stay and why he should go. And we asked you this question. We are going to get to some of your comments. Plus, same thing goes for John Hynes. A lot of credit goes to him for how well the Preds played this year, but is he the best fit long term? We'll go into that. Plus, look at some of the NHL playoff action last night. Coming up today on the Locked On Predators podcast.
Your Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making the Locked On Predators podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm a writer and editor at ontheforecheck.com, and I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer at ontheforecheck.com.
Are we ready to bring the spice today? Are we ready to bring the spice?
Like, we can both have come into this episode a little saucy to begin with, and then we're going to tackle this topic. So who only knows what's going to happen in the next half hour? This could be interesting.
Yeah. We've already missed the great Nashville Twitter war of the last 24 hours.
Come on.
It seems like anybody who remotely covers the Preds with a blue check mark in their name apparently are entering their names in the great Nashville Media Royal Rumble when it comes to David Poile and John Hynes.
Yeah, it's been a whole thing. And you sometimes you just got to sit back and watch. It has been a whole thing. It started with a particular radio personality, and I use that term loosely, kind of criticizing management and saying some things about how Preds affiliated media are biased and not critical. And
well,
it snowballed.
And let me put it like this. I mean, if there's one person in that argument who was let go reportedly for being a little too critical in some of the Bally Sports owned Twitter thread. So, there's that. I mean, here's the thing. I think multiple things can be true here. I think it's fair for first off, let's just get the elephant in the room out of the way. Yeah, you know what? People like Chris Mason, Hal Gill, Willie Donick are going to be overly optimistic about the Nashville Predators because that's what the Nashville Predators want them to do. And, we talk about, teams kind of controlling their narrative. And, we see a lot of teams have this sort of in-house broadcasting. You don't see a lot of work from local TV stations anymore or local outlets, outside of maybe The Athletic. And that's because a lot of teams, and not just in hockey, but around sports, are opting to kind of have their own media department. They can have the podcasts where they ask the players all the questions. They have all this behind the scenes stuff. And you see people, that work for the team kind of championing this. And it's like, look how great it is that, what we want to say isn't distorted. But it also leads you to situations like the one we saw last night where, sometimes you just have to call out the team for not playing well. And I don't think somebody like Chris Mason or Willie Donick really have the freedom to do that in sort of a blunt way. They kind of have to look at the rainbow at the end of the pot of gold, so to speak. They kind of always have to find the silver lining. And that's why I think a lot of people, are kind of critical of the Preds broadcasting department. And I don't blame Chris Mason at all. I really love Chris Mason as an analyst. I love how
he's terrific.
And I think Willie Donick is great, but they're going to be very limited on what they can say about this team. Let's get that out there. And
I don't.
I see you kind of furrowing your brow. So I feel like you have a
Yeah.
counterpoint to that.
Here's kind of my counterpoint to that in this particular situation. I think you are right that, they are storytellers. They build a narrative, and I understand that, but they also have the access to have a better handle on what's going on. The other thing is, I do feel like that they are critical of things when they need to be. I just think it's not the kind of critical people want. For instance, the radio personality, and again, use that term loosely, who was kind of part of this original thing, screaming into the void isn't the only way to disagree. It's not the only way to tell a story. It's not the only way to push back. It's not the only way to voice criticism. And I think the media sometimes here in Nashville, it's about volume and not content. And I feel like, we look at these 4 playoff games that we all had to sit through that were excruciating in many ways. And I feel like, Chris Mason and Willie Donick, I feel like, they called it what it was.
Yeah.
Like, I don't, they didn't rage. They didn't scream, while they were calling this game, but I feel like they were upfront and critical about, hey, this team is doing this wrong. This team is doing this wrong. Just because they don't do it at a volume that is showman, that is P.T. Barnum.
Right.
I don't feel like the criticism of them as they're not critical of this team or they're not presenting a real picture of this team. I just don't feel like that's accurate.
The one thing I don't like from Chris Mason is this kind of, and he responded where it was like, you're part of the media. You don't know more than, the people who are around the team. Where sometimes, as we've seen in the past, you being part of the team, you being part of the narrative is what's causing the team to go downhill. Like, for all the people and, in Vancouver, all the people who were saying, no, we're going kind of in a downward slope here. And everybody's like, no, you don't trust Jim Benning. Like, look at, we have all these really smart hockey people that work in the front office, and then look what happens. Like, they just do what the media said they were going to do every single year. And I'm not saying, the media is right all the time, but I didn't like that sort of narrative of, we work for the team, we know what's going on, behind closed doors. And it's like, well, we know what's happening on the ice. And I get it. Like, not everybody is going to have the same opinion. Like, my opinion on what the Preds need to do this summer is probably different than yours. Yours is probably different than, the person involved, whose is different than Chris Mason, clearly, whose is different than Chris Martell's. And it's ultimately probably all different than what David Poile or whoever is going to wind up doing. So there's all these different, sort of ideas and opinions. And at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is the performance on the ice. And clearly what the Predators are doing on the ice is not translating to being successful.
I would agree. Cut and dry. It's not translating into being successful. This franchise has not won a cup. They've been to the finals, but it's been a rough couple of years since then. But I also think you can measure success in steps, and there's a patience to it that I think maybe you have to factor in as well. But no, I think it's the media's job to talk about the on ice product and point out, here's something going well, here's something not going well. I do have a problem in the situation we're talking about where you have a person who pays little to no attention, who misspells players' names when he rage tweets about them in all caps.
Oh, I'm not defending him in the least bit.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So I'm like, you're not... I feel like I sort of if you're going to start a fight, you're who I'm going to dismiss. Not because, I think Chris Mason, etc., have a completely unbiased view, but because you just don't have the knowledge. You have the volume, you just don't have the knowledge. So, but I agree with you. I mean, there's different ways to look at it, and you look at this Predator season, there's different ways to look at it. There are a handful of things that you can say went really well for the Nashville Predators, but in the end, the result is, holy shit, we got swept in the playoffs.
In not a very close way either.
Oh, it was horrible, but there's nuance to it. Like you said, two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah, there's, I think, at the end of the day, I think everybody involved had some points and have some things that probably disqualify their arguments a little bit. It's just kind of weird. They gave us some entertainment for a little bit on Twitter last night.
It was not boring. It was not boring.
Yeah, nothing about anything that's been going on in the Preds world is boring because, of course, the big talk around town is what is going to happen with David Poile. Has his time run out? Has he earned a little bit longer of a leash than a normal GM would? So we're going to talk about that, whether we think it's time for the Preds to move on or not, and maybe what's one or two things that go into that decision. First, though, I want to mention today's show brought to you by our friends at the Athletic Greens and their new product AG1. I use this product every day. I started taking AG1 simply because they sent it to me for free as part of this ad campaign. I was very skeptical of it. Looked weird. Wasn't like crazy about any like the powders and stuff at the market, but I started taking it just for giggles, and I'm glad I did, because as soon as I started taking it, number one, it tastes great. I get it. It's green. It doesn't look like it might be appetizing, but trust me, it tastes delicious, like a great vanilla flavor. Tastes just like a normal smoothie you would make in the morning. And I noticed since I started taking it, I have more energy throughout the day. My mental focus doesn't crap out halfway through unless I stay up till 2 a.m. recapping hockey. It keeps me going. And yeah, like I am glad that I started taking this. I'm a big believer in AG1. So you may be asking, what is this stuff? With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. They got a special blend of ingredients that supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, energy, recovery, focus, aging, pretty much, everything. If you're balking at the cost, don't. If we break it down, it costs you less than $3 a day, which I'm guaranteeing you is probably less than that Starbucks run you make every single morning. But most importantly, it's cheaper than getting all the different supplements yourself, and you're investing in an all-in-one nutritional insurance for your body. So to make it easy, if you want to try it, Athletic Greens is giving you a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL network. Again, athleticgreens.com/NHL network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. So, and the big talk is David Poile.
Oh, yeah.
The only GM the Preds have ever had. And now, after all these years and kind of the disappointing runs over the past 5 years or so, he is kind of under the microscope.
More so, I think, than we have ever seen. And let's face it, anytime anything would go wrong, whether the Predators would lose a game, or do a trade that people didn't like, #Fire Poile has been trending for forever. And I feel like it's lost, like this whole concept of David Poile stepping down has sort of lost something in the fact that it's sort of the rally cry when things don't go right, smaller things don't go right for the Nashville Predators. But we're at a time right now where this is the most significant pushback, not just angry fans, kind of a pissed off phrase. This is a significant conversation happening around Nashville. And it's really the first time where I feel like it's time. Like it's time to take a really hard look at David Poile as the GM and where this franchise is going and if he is the person to lead it. And I think there's a lot, I mean, there's some debate about that.
Well, and it's more than just the play on the ice too. There's other factors of that. So a lot of
Right.
people are saying attendance has kind of slowly been dripping. Smashville doesn't really have that same presence anymore. And that's not all on Poile. That's on the ownership also, because there have
Mhm.
been a lot of missteps, I think, with ownership after that 2017 Cup run that pissed off a lot of longtime fans. You're also
Mhm.
dealing with,
Yeah.
Nashville has a great section of hockey fans, like a tremendous section of Nashville Predators diehard
Yes.
fans, but it is still kind of a bandwagon market. And it's like that for the Titans too. Fans are going to show up, get loud, and get packed when the team is doing great. But it's not like, if the Toronto Maple Leafs or Montreal Canadiens suck and you turn on
Mhm.
the TV and you listen to sports talk, the number one talk around town is why do the Maple Leafs suck? Why do the Canadiens suck? Why is this so bad? If the Predators suck, as if we can remember back in 2013, 2014, it's worse. They just don't talk about the team at all.
Right.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
I guarantee you there's people walking around Nashville who are like, "Is PK Saban still on the team? Is he still there?
Oh,
What about Pekka
from your
Rinne?
lips to God's
Is
ears.
Pekka is
Oh
Pekka
my
Rinne
gosh.
still there?" Like,
Oh my
that's
goodness.
that's the type of market the Preds are in right now. And that's probably not going to change just based on the nature of Nashville as a community. So
Mhm.
that when you're starting to see things trend towards that, we have mentioned it. A lot of people online have mentioned it. It seems like the Nashville Predators online presence, is kind of getting less active, less vocal.
Mhm.
Fewer people are kind of, consistently checking in throughout the season. And
Right.
that's noticeable. And part of that is just due to the product not really inspiring, exciting levels of confidence right now. And that's where we go to David Boyle.
Yes. And I think it's almost easier if a team is tanking and in a just a bare bones basement
Yeah.
rebuild mode than they are where the Nashville Predators have been, where it's like, are we in or are we out?
Yeah.
We've got one foot in one camp, one foot in the other camp. We talked about competitive rebuild. We've used that
Yeah.
term all season long. That's direct from David Poile. The result of that is it's very murky what that means, what direction that goes, and nobody knows how to set an expectation. And part of the problem this season is there was an expectation at the beginning of the season based on comments made by David Poile, and there was, performance midway through the season that seemed like it's time to change expectation. And then you get to the end of the season and, this Predators team limped to the finish. I mean, this season
Yeah.
ended with a whimper. So it's difficult when you put this um, kind of hazy descriptor on what's happening. And it's also difficult when the on ice product can be looked at as mediocre. Now, we had
Yeah.
great record-setting seasons for players, but you can also kind of look at it and it's mediocre. And it's almost better if you start from scratch and you're terrible or you're really good. It's that mediocre area where Nashville has sort of floated around
Yeah.
off and on. I mean, there was the 2017 Cup run, 2018 President's Trophy, but they've
Two
sort
straight
of kind
division
of
titles.
been two straight division titles, but then there's sort of this first round playoff thing that's been happening since 2019, and it makes you wonder if there is a clear direction from the team. And here's the thing, there may be a clear direction from the team, but it is not, if there is, it is not being communicated to fans. It is not being communicated well. And that counts. Like, it matters that people know what the expectation is, where the direction is heading. And David Poile just has not been good at setting that.
Do you think David Poile, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, it almost feels like there is pressure on him from above to win right now, to be exciting, to get butts in seats and have those butts be very, very loud during the game? Whereas he, is more of like, I don't know, like, I really think that, maybe we should start investing a little bit more in the future, because, you look at where the Predators are going back to the business side. Remember COVID? Remember that whole thing?
Oh, yeah.
That wiped
Remember
out
that whole thing.
That cost the Preds a lot of money, I'm sure. They're just trying to recover, and Smashville hasn't really been as full as it was, back in those prime, 2015, 2016, 2017 days.
Yes.
And, I think maybe there's pressure on David Poile to, maybe go for it. But that's my thing from Poile is, then why haven't you, if that's the case and you go for it and you fail, at least you have, that kind of buffer above you where you can say, well, we went for it because, our business model was we want to be competitive. What's happening right now is you're not moving in any direction. You're keeping the status quo, and the status quo is not good, because let me tell you something, like Matthias Ekholm is depreciating in value. Roman Josi is in the prime of his career, but over the next few years, he is going to depreciate in value. That's not anything like predicting a collapse or anything. That's just, how
numbers
NHL business works. And, you're kind of, you're losing time to kind of make up your mind here. And we talked about this last year, where it seems the Preds are at a crossroads and they're not sure what direction they want to go. For the last really 2 years, they haven't gone either direction on that crossroads. They have been sitting at the intersection, like sobbing, waiting for somebody to basically take their hand and lead them down their road. And, it's tough because, you don't want to tear apart a team that is, was on the verge of a Stanley Cup a few years ago. And, they won the President's Trophy the next year. And we're off to a hot start. And all of a sudden, all these big investments you made are scoring and putting up, record numbers. So I get it. You don't want to tear it apart. But if that's the case, then you got to give them some help. Like, you have to make them competitive. You have to go, okay, like if we're not going to win it, then we're going to try, because we're going to try to invest and get us closer.
I agree with what you're saying. I want to push back on just one little thing, and I think you and I will agree on this if I can explain it well, is I feel like inaction is an action when it's a decision. Like, we talk about David
working
yet. And I don't know that it will. And here's why. I think I would be okay with the Predators not doing anything at this trade deadline. I would be okay with the Predators, not making big moves necessarily, if I felt like I knew why. Inaction is a decision. There will be a point in time when the Nashville Predators commit to a rebuild, David Poile or whoever the GM will be, there will be times where the best action will be inaction, because there are some things that just take time. The problem with it now is we don't know that this inaction is leading to anything. I love your analogy. They're sitting at the crossroad. That's what this feels like. There feels like there's not been a decision, and you can choose to do nothing, and that can be a wise choice if it's part of a decision. I don't know that the Nashville Predators and David Poile have made a decision on where this team is going. And that's where they're going to get stuck if they don't. As my grandmother, God bless her, used to say, shit or get off the pot.
Yeah. And do you trust Poile's vision? And I think that's what this whole argument comes down to, on whether or not Poile should be back. Because if he is not here, or if you don't trust that he is the man who is going to give you what you want as a franchise, then it's time to move on. And here's the thing, because I've seen, and we'll get to more on this in a second, because I know we got to go to break in just a minute. But, I think the last word I kind of want to say on this part of the argument is, I've heard a lot of people saying it's like, oh, well, everybody's forgetting what he's done for this franchise, and this is disrespectful to all of that. But it's not, because, again, this goes back to what was our thing earlier today. More than one thing can be true. You can put David Poile as one of the most important people in this franchise history. You can appreciate the work he did as GM to bring in some phenomenal players, made some of the best moves. One trade is considered one of the best steals in NHL history. Philip Forsberg for Martin Erat. That's considered maybe one of the top 3 or 5 trades of all time. And, so we appreciate him for that. But at the same time, there can also be a point where you're like, okay, we appreciate everything you did, but it's time to do something else. Like this, we need a different way of thinking. We saw it with Barry Trotz. Phenomenal coach, led some Preds teams that had no business being successful to a lot of success. Peter Laviolette changed the identity of this team, was a phenomenal coach, better than I think in retrospect people give him credit for now. But when he was fired, it was time. Like, I think everybody knew, okay, we need something else. And that's, I think, maybe where I'm at with David Poile. It's a lot of great moves, set this team up for a lot of success over the past 2.5 decades, but maybe it's time for a different vision.
Yep, I think, and yes, I think you're right. We're going to kind of finish. I want to tag on to what you're saying here in just a minute about David Poile, but we do need to take a quick break and let you know that this episode's brought to you by our partners at BetOnline. BetOnline continues to be the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports information. You can find all of the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. So I wanted to jump in just real quick and tag on to what you were saying about, two things can be true at the same time. David Poile he has been a phenomenal general manager. Timing matters. And the other thing is, building a team is a little bit of a different skill set from rebuilding a team. Kenny Rogers says you got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. And there's a skill set in that. And David Poile has done a good job with this new franchise, but it may not be his skill set to be able to make the decisions or to set this team up for a rebuild. And that's not a criticism of Poile. It just might not be what he is good at doing necessarily. And here's the thing. We also haven't seen him commit one way or the other, so we don't know that.
Right.
But I do want to say that if the Predators say we need to rebuild, we need to really commit to kind of restructuring this team and the direction it's going, David Poile just might not be the right person for that, because that's a skill set. Like, that's very different than just managing a competitive team or building a team from scratch. And so that's an angle that I think you have to look at. It's not the same as just coasting with a team.
Yeah, that's very interesting too, because there are some GMs who, their default. We saw it with Stan Bowman. We saw it with Ken Holland at the end of Detroit, where it's just like, all he knows is kind of just how to take a team on the up and up and build around them. He may not be the best person to kind of tear things down and start from scratch, and that's fine.
Yes.
There's very few GMs that have been able to both successfully kind of tear down and rebuild while also maintaining them as a great team. So that's a very big, I mean, the two you can think of right now are Steve Yzerman when he did it with Tampa Bay, and Joe Sakic. Those are kind of the big two ones that come to mind. So it'll be interesting to see what direction the Predators will go in. Either way, I don't think this is a decision that is going to be taken lightly. I think the owners really are going to take a very long look at this. It's according to, I think it was maybe Alex Doherty that reported this, but basically it sounds like David Poile's contract is just kind of like an automatic renewal at the end of each year.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see if anybody, kind of opts out of that. It'll be interesting for sure. On the other,
do you think Poile will be back? Do you think he'll be back?
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah. That's where I'm landing too. Yeah.
Yeah. The should and will are two very different things to that equation.
Two different questions. Yep. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. We also put this question on Twitter, by the way. We put out a tweet that said, should the Predators part ways with GM David Poile? 82% of you said yes. So I think we kind of know what the overwhelming sentiment is.
Yes.
On the other side of that, and John Hynes, that was the source of the big fight we talked about earlier.
Yes.
This is a little bit different case, because I think that he has probably earned, truthfully, another season, or, at least in a couple of seasons, to see where he can take this team. Again, I don't think you can judge a person's entire scope of their tenure based on just one thing. And I think John Hynes' decisions down the stretch should certainly put him under the microscope a little bit. But I also don't want that to overshadow what he was able to do this season. I mean, he unlocked the full potential of a lot of players. And he has done really well at kind of helping some other players kind of find their mojo and find creative new ways to use. He needs to be better with younger players, I think, and maybe that is going to be an X factor towards any coaching decision down the line.
Yes.
But, all in all, would you say that John Hynes has probably earned another season?
I would say that. I feel like John Hynes does not get enough credit for what he walked into and how he's walked it out, and the success that this team has found. No, the team has not gotten into the second round of the playoffs. They're not where people feel like they should be, especially with the individual performances this season. I understand that. John Hynes came in and gave this team what they needed, which was a clear vision, very specific path forward, and they needed that. And I think they will still need that, especially if this team decides that they are going to kind of bare bones down to the studs something, moving forward with a rebuild. I like John Hynes a lot. I like him a lot. I think he's a great coach. He's a good young coach. He has a clear vision. I think he communicates well. He has, we talk about the locker room clean out yesterday. Every single player spoke very positively about Hynes. And of course, they're not going to come out and be like, he's an idiot. But you can read between the lines enough to know that they really genuinely respect him. And I think he has earned the right for another contract. I would not, the fire Hynes truly mystifies me. I'll be honest with you. It mystifies me. No, he didn't get the team to correct things like penalties down the line, and that was, part of what doomed the Nashville Predators. But two things can be true at the same time. He can have done some amazing things. He could still have some challenges. I just don't get the fire Hynes movement. I don't get it. There is one caveat. If you get a new general manager, then that makes things a little bit more complicated. That GM may want to bring in their own coach. And I understand that. The only coach that would be acceptable to me to bring in would be Carl Taylor. But that's a whole nother discussion.
I feel like that's kind of the overwhelming sentiment from Nashville fans at this point. But I agree. I feel like Hynes is probably tied to Poile. If Poile's back, I don't see John Hynes going anywhere. I would be shocked if the Preds move on from him.
Shocked, yes.
If a new GM comes in, maybe somebody from the outside. I think John Hynes is safe if something happens like David Poile retires or resigns or something like that, or gets promoted to executive vice president of whatever, those things where it's like, hey, we like having you around as a figurehead, but please don't touch this team anymore. Somebody like, either Scotty Nickel or Brian Poile step up and be the new guy. I think that's probably the case. If ownership goes a completely different direction, then I would say either Hynes is, I still think maybe he's earned another season, but I think he is going to have a lot shorter of a leash than he would.
Yes.
If Poile was here.
No, I would agree with that. I really would like to see Hynes stay. I think people have been critical of Hynes because how quickly he came in. And I think a lot of Nashville media and fans felt like the Predators maybe didn't take advantage of an opportunity to make a huge change. But John Hynes, I think, is the guy for Nashville right now, barring a change in general management. And I'm here for it. I'm here for keeping Hynes.
Yeah, I think I am too. I think he's definitely earned another season, and kind of interesting to see what he can do with maybe a different looking roster next year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
For sure. So yeah, that was kind of a lot of different stuff for us to just kind of vent out in the universe there.
Yeah, we did good not to argue too much. That was great because we came into this a little saucy.
We did come into this a little bit saucy. This is also my last episode for a week. I will be out of the country, so we will still have Anne's beautiful smiling face here every single day. But just keep in mind for that. I know Anne has a couple of great crossovers planned for tomorrow, next week.
Yes. So we've got lots of great stuff coming. If you are following the playoffs tomorrow, I'm going to talk to a couple of my Locked On counterparts about why Nashville Predators fans may want to jump on the bandwagon with their team next week. We're going to look at prospects. We're going to look at some statistics from the season. We've got tons of content, so make sure you stick around.
Absolutely. And where can the fine people find you until then?
You can find my work at ontheforecheck.com. You can find me on Twitter at AnnK_Mama on Ice.
I'm Nick Morgan. You can find me at ontheforecheck.com as well. Also, be sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at LO_Predators. And if you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment. Helps other people find this. Thank you for making Locked On Predators your first listen of the day. As always, we will be back tomorrow with more Preds talk.